My introduction to the franchise started when I rented Resident Evil 4 on the PS2. I wouldn't actually get to play Resident Evil 4 for a few days after bringing it home as, well, my stepdad never stopped playing it long enough for me to start. Every day I'd come back from work at GameStop and see him in my room with the lights out, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring intently at the TV with the volume up and the PS2 controller in hand. My stepdad, not a gamer, not really familiar with the controller, struggling to control Leon on his quest to save Ashley Graham from the Los Illuminados in Spain. Every time he would get stuck or die, he'd get me or my sister and have us bring up the game facts guide and tell him how to proceed with the next section. And he would often ask me for tips on how to beat certain bosses or encounters during family lunch and dinner. For weeks and weeks, he was glued to this game. I would come back from work and hop up on the bed right next to him, laughing and shrieking alongside him as he ventured further and further into the game. The sound of the door breaking open and the breathing of the regenerator had him loudly exclaim, "Nope, not today." My sister and I eagerly encouraging him to continue forward as we had to know what that noise was coming from. That first village encounter, the hymnal chanting of the zealots, as well as the merchant's famous, "What are you buying?" all became inside jokes we still share to this day. I don't exactly know why he decided to start Resident Evil 4. Nor what led him to continue playing it, as he'd never shown any interest in other games I was playing. But nevertheless, this series became something we would share. I believe it was the slower-based gameplay, the tension, the horror. It was the tight, controlled gameplay, the feeling of focusing intently on one enemy, trying desperately to headshot it and get the stagger off, followed by the roundhouse kick as other enemies charged in. That feeling of just barely surviving the opening village encounter after being scared and terrified once the chainsaw enemy gets added, finally lasting long enough for the church bells to ring. That elation leading into a lull as you gather yourself, ready to face the next challenge. The controls were relatively simple and easy to understand. The aiming felt intuitive, and enemies reacted to being shot in various body parts as you'd expect. This kind of visceral and tactile response, in addition to the excellent pacing, intriguing, although campy, story, and set pieces, I think played a huge role in gathering and keeping his attention, as I know those features were what kept me coming back and fighting the Los Plagas. When Resident Evil 5 released, and I had come back from college during a break, he had already picked up the limited edition red Xbox 360 Elite with the game, and was eagerly anticipating my return so we could play it co-op. He didn't enjoy this one that much. It had become more action-focused, more fast-paced, more over-the-top, and that gameplay wasn't what had excited him and drawn him into the series. That gunfighting wasn't what had made the zealots and regenerators so terrifying. It wasn't what had him glued to the game for weeks on end. And by the time Resident Evil 6 had released, he was no longer interested in playing. And that was it. It kind of just fell away. I was living in another state, had a job and an apartment elsewhere, and didn't really see them that much, but we didn't ever play any games together again. We'd still laugh about Resident Evil 4 and some of the memories and experiences and boss fights and enemies in the game, but, nothing new. That time we spent together bonding over something, working together to beat a game, that just kind of fell by the wayside. The series didn't mean much to me anymore. I had had my fun with 1.5 games with my stepdad together, but the rest of the series didn't hold much interest for me. Going back and playing the older games, not really. Playing 6 was not really that interesting, and because I didn't play 6 and didn't follow the series, 7 also didn't really particularly grab me, even though it had kind of changed to a first-person thing. Just wasn't the right time, I guess. Really wasn't until the release of Resident Evil 2 and almost a year after that game's release, with just all the positive reviews and positive criticisms that I was hearing about it, how great of a game it was, how awesome it was, that I decided to give it a shot, and I'm so glad I did. Now, Resident Evil 2 is survival horror through and through. A constant feeling of tension and dread, every bullet and healing item expended, a battle to thread the needle carefully between pulling ahead now or trying to run past just a few more enemies to save those precious resources. With limited ammo and healing, limited defensive items, and in the hardcore mode, limited saves, this game pushes you into uncomfortable situations constantly. This juggling with the enemies also extends itself into inventory management. 2020 inventory management, it's a weird thing to even say, but having to choose between which weapons to take, how much healing items, how much ammo, how many defensive items, etc. Planning your route through the Raccoon Police Department, or RPD, knowing the enemies you'll face and that you need to visit 3 or 4 more rooms so you purposefully only bring the handgun to save space was exhilarating. The tone and atmosphere of this game is amazingly dark and foreboding. I felt vulnerable, and the game feels tough. Enemies are tough to take down, and they hit hard. And I love the randomness to how many shots it takes to actually kill or stagger a zombie. Sometimes a zombie will die from one critical headshot, and their heads will explode into a gory mess. Other times you can dump 11 or more rounds into their heads, and they'll keep on coming. Zombies have a fleshed out hitbox with individual body parts severable, and those body parts having their own, for lack of a better description, HP and armor values. You can blow a zombie's legs off and it'll pull itself forward on its arms. Remove the arms and it'll shamble towards you, falling into you to attack. You remove all the limbs and it'll still flail forwards, biting your leg if you get too close. They can also lie sort of stunned on the ground for a bit, requiring you to empty another round into them or otherwise slice them with your knife, or roll the dice in a key moment when another enemy is chasing you, hot on your trail, running over a previously downed zombie only for it to scream and suddenly reach out and grab you. It was terrifying. They'll also realistically interact and move through the environment. If they walk over a corpse, sometimes they'll stumble and trip and fall to the ground. If there's a waist-high desk in between you and the zombie, they'll throw themselves onto that desk rather than path around it. If they're on a ledge above you, they'll fling themselves over the railing to get to the ground faster. It's so scary how they move towards you. Furthermore, with their erratic movement and jostling, you will miss shots. And this randomness in their HP and movement, I think, is just great. They are the best zombies I have ever experienced, and it felt satisfying to approach and kill them again. And a lot of that feeling is due to the improved engine and camera, leading into how precise and tight the gameplay feels. Some of the movement can take a moment or two to get comfortable with, and I'd often bump into door frames or hang on to cabinets when I first started, but it's quick to internalize how to move properly in this world. But aiming feels great. You can move while aiming, allowing situations where you're running from a group of zombies and one shambles in front of you. Quickly raise up your handgun, take a few shots to hopefully get a stagger, and desperately run past, hoping to make it to a safe room before being devoured. But if you can remain still while aiming, your crosshairs will gradually shrink and become more accurate. At max accuracy, you're conferred a damage bonus, again, introducing an element of, well, should I maximize every bullet I have and thus standing still and maybe exposing myself to damage, or should I just shoot wildly, get a stagger and continue running past? There's no roundhouse kick, no dodging or jumping or otherwise evade type moves, but there are defensive items. A knife, a frag grenade, and a flashbang are all available. The knife can be used defensively once grabbed to stab whatever enemy has grabbed you and push them off before taking any damage, although the durability of the knife will decrease. And you'll be forced to take down whatever enemy currently has your knife stuck in them in order to retrieve it. Sometimes you're not able to do this. You're in a mad dash to a safe room and you're forced to leave a high durability knife in an enemy, lending further credence to the management portion of the survival horror. The frag and the flashbang will be tossed at enemies or jammed into zombies' mouths if you're grabbed, again allowing you to escape that without taking any damage. And you can shoot that grenade to set it off or otherwise wait for it to explode normally. However, if you use those frags or flashbangs offensively, you'll get a greater effect. Again, giving you options and values to gauge on how to best spend your resources. Then there are first aid sprays and green, red, and blue herbs to use as healing items, with the player able to combine those herbs to achieve various amplified effects. What I love about this is that by trying to maximize your healing, since first aid spray will heal you to full, naturally you'll want to wait until your character's health is in the red, from fine to caution to danger, in order to get the most value from the item. Well, I got grabbed once, but I'm only in caution. If I keep exploring, and maybe if I get grabbed again, then I'll probably be in danger, and then at that point I can use my healing item. However, what's so smart about this is that your character's movement speed decreases as you've taken more damage, thus making it harder to evade future attacks. The red and blue herb mix provides a defense buff and poison resistance, incentivizing you to wait until a boss fight in order to fully maximize the use of those items. Key items, of course, take up inventory space as well, and you'll need space to hold on to those keys to open doors or badges to unlock certain things, in addition to your weapons and ammo. The inventory is so smartly designed and balanced, using frags and flashbangs offensively to greater effect, or saving them to use defensively, using your knife to push an attacker off you, but then being forced to take down that enemy to retrieve it. How your character will move slower as you've taken damage, making the trade-offs not so clear about when to actually use a health item. And speaking of smartly designed, the map is extremely readable and usable. Rooms are color coordinated based on whether or not you fully examined them or if something else remains. If you see an item in a room and for whatever reason don't pick it up, it'll be identified on the map for future reference. Doors and other interactables will be highlighted, letting you know what sections are off limits and providing context as to what's needed to open them. Now, with that said, this game is designed around backtracking. On the surface, like inventory management, another negative trope, but done with excellence here. The enemies you neglected to take down remain in those areas, and you'll be forced to pass through almost every zone multiple times, especially if you're looking to 100% the map. Do you spend resources to take enemies down or run past them? Well, if you spent the ammunition, maybe you don't have enough to deal with a later, greater threat or a boss. Or if you've chosen to hoard resources by running past enemies, when being chased, those enemies will remain there, blocking your path, eventually forcing you to maybe expend a defensive or a health item whilst moving around. And those zombies aren't confined to their specific area. They can bash on doors, eventually smashing them open and lurching forward, trying desperately to kill enemies on your side of the room whilst a horde of zombies is furiously pounding on the door, hearing it creak and moan under their assault until finally the door flings open and they pour in was exhilarating and thrilling. Zombies will also funnel in through the windows of the RPD, requiring you to board them up to stop them from coming in. But again, of course, you don't have enough boards for every window, forcing a choice onto the player. Well, I feel it's almost mandatory to board up the windows where the lickers are roaming, as I can't run or shoot if any zombies are around there. But that's going to mean on the other side of the map, those 4 windows in that long hallway are all going to be open. The decisions in this game and the situations you're forced into are amazing and meaningful, which leads me into adaptive difficulty, as I've seen countless threads of people complaining about this feature. Personally, I don't mind this at all. I prefer an analogy linking difficulty to fighting games, in that I'd rather play with an opponent and win 50% of the games, or 40%, than win 100% or 0. 50-50 allows me and my opponent an equal chance to take the round. Even 40-60 is not so insurmountable that I'm unable to grasp new tactics and strategies and slowly improve my game. But getting to a point where you're winning 100% of the time or losing 100% of the time doesn't allow you to really enjoy those wins. And certainly doesn't allow you to even understand why it is that you're losing. You just can't seem to do anything. Now, there are mods, and the game does offer a hardcore mode for those opposed to the idea of adaptive difficulty, but There are no huge swings in difficulty. It's mostly minor changes, nothing egregious, but I felt like the game constantly keeping me in that 50-50 or 40-60 ratio where I always feel like I'm just slightly behind the 8 ball, where I just barely have enough resources to make it past this next boss. That seems integral to the idea of survival horror for me. Now, since I brought up liquors in the prior section regarding the windows, let's talk about the different enemies in this game. This game has a variety of enemy types, each with their own unique spin and twist. And again, they can each be approached in a number of ways, and the different guns your character will pick up can be used to a greater or lesser capacity against those monsters. Zombies can be approached from afar with the handgun, waiting for the crosshairs to shrink before firing off each shot, and backpedaling to always stay out of range. Or you can just walk up close and personal and hope to decapitate them in one shot with the shotgun. The liquors, for instance, require you to not make any noise in order to pass by unhindered, as any running or shooting will have them dash with ungodly speed towards you, leaping at you and shredding your character apart. Even more mutations and strains of the virus impede your path, and again, they're going to have their own behaviors and weaknesses. But one enemy you can't kill, no matter how many bullets you expend, is the terrifying Terminator-like Mr. X. This enemy shows up at a particular moment whilst exploring the RPD and will hound you incessantly thereafter. Shooting at this enemy eventually can lead to him staggering, providing you with valuable time to run past, but also likely leading to you shooting off his fedora, which only enrages him, causes him to chase after you even faster thereafter. You can evade Mr. X by rapidly moving through rooms and corridors or finding a safe room, as those rooms he's unable to pursue you through. But then you'll hear his pounding footsteps reverberating throughout the RPD as he continues his search for you. Staying safe and secure in the safe room, knowing and hearing those footsteps of this unkillable death machine opening doors, throwing zombies out of his way on his singular purpose to find and kill you. Using your ears to pinpoint where he is and whether or not that gives you enough time to make it to the objective and back was exhilarating. You see, not only does Mr. X hunt for you, he'll also respond to noises you make. Running, shooting, throwing grenades, etc. While it might be necessary to do that in order to move forward, this only decreases the time before he eventually throws open the door to whatever room you're in and once again sets his sight on destroying you. And the music that accompanies him is the best in the game. How it steadily grows louder as he's near until eventually he catches up to you and then the music comes in on full blast. And it doesn't stop there. Audibly, this game has binaural audio.
Shit.
Coupling that with a large dynamic range and quality set of headphones, and you're in for a real treat. You guys know I'm a huge fan of audio, and any game that has native binaural audio or Dolby Atmos support for headphones gets a huge plus from me. The only two things I wasn't a big fan of is the lack of distinction in verticality, and some of the handguns feel a little light. Their sound profiles weren't as meaty as I would have liked, especially in comparison to the grenade launcher or the shotgun. But things like bullet casings hitting the ground, excellent use of dynamic reverb and delay based on the environment help really sell not only your weapons and grenades, but also the voice lines and zombie shouts. I also love the phrases the characters would say under their breaths. These lines added so much character and believability for me. I've not played the original RE2, but I did pick up the deluxe edition that comes with the original soundtrack. And coming from someone with no nostalgia towards the original pieces, I preferred the remakes.
Anybody here?
Hello? Is anybody here? Jesus! They're everywhere!
There's no real musical pieces in the remake. There's not a lot of stingers or cues that play when moving into different zones or areas. The safe room plays a track the first time you enter it and never repeats itself, but this quiet ambiance was so tense for me. Save for Mr. X's theme, just breathing in the RPD was more than enough. And I tried playing through it with the original soundtrack and it felt oddly out of place. The music that plays in the main lobby, the music that plays when being chased for the first time, just didn't fit the tone or the gameplay style of the remake, in my opinion. I preferred less music, hearing the chandeliers creaking, the liquors on a separate floor, getting surprised by the sudden screaming as a zombie threw themselves at the window, or Mr. X suddenly crashed through a wall. Those moments were better sold with the juxtaposition between the remake's quieter approach to audio than the original's musical pieces. Tension is greatly heightened by the excellent audio design and production, and the mixing deserves to be called out for its excellence in addition to the graphics. Now, I'd like to nerd out a bit on how great the RE engine is. Everything can be changed in the PC version. From a lot of controversial options that people like to turn off: bloom, lens flare, certain anti-aliasing types, depth of field, film noise, lens distortion, and motion blur, to just quality of life stuff like flipping between DirectX 11 and 12, turning on shadow caching if your GPU can support it, volumetric and particle lighting, 3 different types of ambient occlusion, and none of them requiring a restart besides changing the DirectX type. And I have no idea how Capcom was able to optimize this engine so well. It's quite simply jaw-dropping, especially in comparison to how badly Monster Hunter launched on PC. This game just runs well. The voice acting and facial capture is also stunning.
This is good news. We can get you to a hospital.
No, I am not the priority here.
Lieutenant, I'm not just gonna leave you here.
I'm giving you an order, rookie. You save yourself first. I'd come with you, but I'd just slow you down. Now, you'll need this.
I can't take him.
Stop. And don't make my mistake. If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate. You take it out, or you run. Got it?
Yes, sir.
The detail on models is insane. Looking through the gallery, you can really see the amount of detail on every model in the game. And with the RE engine, the physics the zombies have is amazing. Blowing off limbs, cutting holes into enemies, seeing your characters carry scar marks with them on their clothes, seeing how zombies react to losing body parts. Not only the characters, but the RPD itself feels believable. So much density and attention to tiny details. So much environmental storytelling. There's barricades and bullet holes with dead bodies already lining the halls of the RPD. It feels real and believable. Like a real place with real people holding up as best they could as the outbreak infected more and more in the city, and those desperate eventually made their way to the police department. My favorite room is the press room with the dead body in the center with bullet holes in the door, light spilling through those bullet holes into the dark corridor beyond. You can really feel that this was a place they tried to maintain order in and issue commands, but eventually it all fell under the strain of the outbreak. Resident Evil 2 features 2 playable characters in the campaign. Leon Kennedy, a rookie cop whose literal first day on the job sees him heading headfirst into the outbreak, and Claire Redfield, younger sister to the STARS operative Chris Redfield, one of the characters from Resident Evil 1, as she's heading to the city to find her now missing brother. These characters offer unique viewpoints and story sections, a unique side character that accompanies them, their own weapons and areas only they can access. Whilst Leon receives a shotgun, which I heavily depended on, Claire had a submachine gun and a grenade launcher, which forced me to rethink certain encounters and situations. Each gun can have a variety of mods and attachments, which can improve the gun's capabilities, but might increase the inventory space it requires. Again, adding to the trade-offs. Will you take the burst fire attachment to provide more stopping power and easier staggers at the cost of taking up a second slot and requiring a higher expenditure of bullets? Now, you're able to remove those mods so the choices aren't permanent, but I enjoyed them all the same. In addition to decisions with weapons, you'll also accrue gunpowder of various types. This gunpowder can be combined to produce additional ammunition for your weapons, with the rare types of ammunition not only being harder to find the appropriate gunpowder for, but also creating less rounds of it than, say, the basic handgun. Now, there's essentially 4 playthroughs this game offers: a Leon A to Claire B run and a Claire A to Leon B run. Leon A has you explore the story as Leon until reaching its conclusion, and then picking up with Claire's perspective and proceeding with the story and finally seeing the true ending. And vice versa, Claire A to Leon B. Each will provide further context and story bits that you won't see in the other playthroughs, requiring you to play through all 4 runs in order to fully grasp all this game has to offer. My first playthrough took about 7 hours for the A campaign and 6 for the B campaign for reference. However, it's a bummer when playing a character's B scenario seeing just how much is repeated. Ostensibly, the idea would be that you play a character's A run and then flip to the other character following in their footsteps shortly thereafter. But the reality is you repeat a lot of the same puzzles and boss fights. I was very intrigued the first time, thinking that any ammunition I picked up in my A playthrough wouldn't be available during the B run, and not only would I need to manage my character's resources, but also keep in mind how the second character would fare. This was all for naught. Additionally, with the 2 characters being in the same areas, you'd think there'd be room for dialogue or cooperative moments between the 2, but aside from a couple notes and a few cinematics where they talk, there's next to no interaction between them. With some minor variations in rooms unlocked and puzzle solutions, you run through the same locations, fighting the same enemies, and while maybe they appear in different places or with different numbers, it wasn't different enough. It's definitely a missed opportunity to fully flesh this mechanic out. But after beating the campaign, you'll unlock the 4th survivor mode, a sickeningly hard side scenario in which you play as an operative who's trying to escape the outbreak, and 3 other ghost survivor modes that see you play through the eyes of a few side characters you'll encounter on your main campaign. Aside from these other game modes, there are of course further unlockables and challenge runs you can undertake, leading you to start up yet another run into Raccoon City, but this time without taking any damage or without opening the item box, etc. There's so many different ways to play and unlockables to gather that I've probably started up 7 new games. And I don't typically replay games. They lose a lot of the enjoyment once I've kind of figured out the systems and understand where things are and how everything works. I kind of like to move on to the next thing. But The way you can play this game, the challenge runs, it just keeps me perpetually in that mode of wanting to constantly explore more and more of it. It's awesome. This game is really, really good. And while I don't think anything will ever unseat Dark Souls as my favorite, this is quite possibly my second favorite game of all time. It's beyond my expectations of what a Resident Evil could be. I would very much like to sit my stepfather down and watch him play through this game, offering tips and tricks just like I did more than a decade ago, getting scared by Mr. X with him and cheering as he slowly but surely takes down each enemy and boss, eventually making it out of Raccoon City. Coming up with our own unique moments and memories of scary events that we'll be able to talk about in the future. Being able to bond over a hobby I used to enjoy so much in isolation with my stepdad was very powerful and meaningful to me. It led to me being able to feel connected and close to him at a time when I felt extremely depressed and scared and alone. The greatest praise I can give this game is that I know I'll be able to forge new memories with my stepdad based on this game returning to what made it so enjoyable for us in the first place. The true survival horror experience. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that worked on this project.